Let's take a look back at every #1 ranked high school basketball recruit in the country from all the way back in the year 2000 to the year 2020. High school recruiting rankings have been a staple in the basketball world for decades. Being deemed the #1 player in the country is a high honor. It comes with expectations that you will be a future #1 overall pick in the NBA draft, a future NBA star, a future face of an NBA franchise. But a whole lot of guys that were deemed the #1 player in the country did not pan out at all. Or in the case of a few guys I will talk about in this video, tragedy struck in their lives. So let's take a look at every #1 recruit from 2000 to 2020. In the year 2000, the #1 ranked player was Eddie Griffin, a standout big man from Philadelphia. Eddie Griffin was extremely talented, but there were some questions about his character early on. He went on to win National Freshman of the Year at Seton Hall and was taken 7th overall in the draft by the Rockets. But in his third NBA season, Griffin was involved in a car crash. Witnesses and friends stated that Eddie was watching a pornographic movie on DVD in his vehicle while driving, and he was drunk. Griffin played his last NBA game in 2006, and in 2007 he was involved in another car accident that ended up taking his life. He was driving 3 times over the legal limit and struck a moving train. The #1 recruit in 2001 was DeJuan Wagner, the father of current #1 overall recruit DJ Wagner. We did a whole video about DeJuan and DJ, so you can check that out to learn more. But DeJuan was the best high school player in the history of New Jersey. He averaged 43 points per game as a senior and had one game where he scored 100 points. He was the 6th overall pick in 2002 and averaged over 20 points per game in his first 11 games of his career. But then health problems derailed his career. DeJuan had ulcerative colitis and only ended up playing 2 full NBA seasons. The #1 recruit in 2002 was Lenny Cook. Lenny was considered the best high school player in the country at that time, over Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James, who was a junior. Lenny was averaging 31 points per game in his senior year, but only played in 8 games due to being deemed academically ineligible. He had to do a whole nother year of school, but he had already exhausted his playing eligibility. At the end of the 2002 school year, Cook had multiple options for basketball: North Carolina, St. John's, and Ohio State. But he had agents telling him that they promised he would be drafted if he surpassed college to enter the NBA draft. Well, in the 2002 NBA draft, every single team passed on him, and Lenny Cook would never play a single game in the NBA. So those first 3 guys gave us an interesting look into how even the #1 high school basketball player's career can take a turn for the worst. But of course, not every guy we talk about in this video has a sad ending, especially not the #1 players in 2003 and 2004. LeBron James and Dwight Howard. I think we all know what happened to these guys. LeBron was the most hyped up high school player ever. He was deemed the chosen one and still exceeded all expectations to become one of the greatest ever. And then Dwight, another guy who went straight from high school to the #1 overall pick. He's had a Hall of Fame career of his own that includes 8 All-Star appearances and 3 Defensive Player of the Years. The only real update I can give here is that Dwight is now playing in Taiwan and just had a fierce battle against 7'5" Indian big man Sim Bhullar. Let's move on to 2005. The #1 player was Gerald Green. Gerald was a high-flying wing from Houston who famously only had 9 fingers due to a dunking accident. He became one of the last players to enter the NBA straight from high school when the Celtics took him 18th overall. Gerald went on to play 12 years in the NBA, with his best coming in 2013-14 season with the Suns, where he averaged 16 points a game. But to me, he'll always be remembered as one of the most electrifying dunkers ever and a cheat code in 2K. #1 in 2006 was the big man from Indiana, Greg Oden. Oden was the unanimous #1 player in high school, and he carried that throughout college at Ohio State. Oden and Kevin Durant were considered one of the best top 2 draft prospects of any class ever, but injuries simply derailed his career. He missed his entire rookie year with a knee injury and was essentially done playing after just 2 seasons. Greg Oden is one of the NBA's biggest what-ifs when it comes to injuries. In 2007, the #1 guy was Eric Gordon. Interestingly enough, Eric was actually teammates with Greg Oden in AAU ball. He went on to be taken 7th overall in 2008. In just his 3rd NBA season, Gordon averaged 22 points a game with the Clippers. That ended up being his career best, but he's made a lot of money in 14 years, primarily as a role player. #1 in 2008 is another interesting one, Brandon Jennings from Compton, California. Jennings Jennings became the first player who skipped college to play professional basketball in Europe to be drafted by an NBA team. For the first week of his NBA career, Jennings looked like a future Hall of Famer. In just his 7th NBA game, Brandon Jennings scored 55 points, but injuries and maturity issues limited his success in the league. He did average 19 points a game in his 3rd season with Milwaukee, but he never made an All-Star game and was out of the league by 2018. The next two guys I'm about to talk about are examples of players who had long NBA careers but still never lived up to that #1 recruit hype. Derek Favors in 2009 and Harrison Barnes in 2010. A lot of people forget that Derek Favors was a former #3 overall pick in the NBA draft. You could consider him a bust, but he's hung around in the league. He's now in his 13th NBA season and found a lot of success in his prime with the Jazz. Harrison Barnes was a 7th overall pick out of North Carolina and won a championship with the Warriors in his 3rd year. Year in and year out, Barnes is a guy that will average a productive 16 points a game. But he didn't ever make the leap to star status like some thought he would when he was balling in his freshman year at North Carolina. #1 in 2011 is a guy that did make the leap to star status, Anthony Davis. AD had all the hype in the world coming out of Perspectives Charter School in Chicago. He exceeded expectations at Kentucky. He led the entire nation in blocks as a freshman and won National College Player of the Year. He also led Kentucky to a national title. AD was the obvious #1 pick in 2012. He's now in his 11th NBA season and has 8 All-Star appearances and an NBA championship under his belt. The #1 player in 2012 was Nerlens Noel. When he committed to Kentucky coming out of high school, some thought the Wildcats found another Anthony Davis just 1 year later. Davis had an all-time great shot blocking season in his freshman year where he averaged 4.7 a game, and Nerlens followed that up by averaging 4.4 blocks per game in his freshman year. Nerlens wasn't near the offensive talent AD was, but still got drafted 6th overall in that strange 2013 NBA draft. Nerlens is still in the league. He's with the Pistons, his 5th NBA team, but he's been nothing more than a role player in his career. #1 in the 2013 class was Andrew Wiggins. Wiggins was one of the most hyped up high school prospects ever, coming out of Huntington Prep. He had a perfect 1.0 rating on 24/7 Sports, something that had only been given to LeBron James, Dwight Howard, and Greg Oden. Wiggs was called Maple Jordan and received comparisons to Kobe Bryant. He kept that reputation throughout college, went #1 overall to the Cavaliers, and was then traded to the Wolves, where he didn't live up to the hype. Of course, his career has been revived with the Warriors, where he made an all-star team last year, thanks to some K-pop fans on Twitter, and won a title as arguably the 2nd best player on the team. For the next 6 guys I'm about to talk about, not living up to the hype will be a common theme. #1 in 2014 was Jahlil Okafor, the National Player of the Year in high school, who became known for his generational ability to score in the low post. He helped lead Duke to a national championship as a freshman alongside his close friend Tyus Jones. Jahlil was taken 3rd overall in 2015 and impressed right away. He averaged 17 points a game as a rookie for a horrible 76ers team. It quickly became clear that those rookie numbers were empty stats because Jahlil never really carved out an important role for an NBA team for the rest of his career and was out of the league by 2021. #1 in 2015 was Ben Simmons. Simmons has had a complicated career since being named the High School Player of the Year in his senior season at Montverde. He showed off so much skill and potential for growth at LSU that he went #1 overall despite concerns about his work ethic and attitude. Those concerns didn't seem to be an issue early on, and he quickly became an all-NBA player and defender for the 76ers. But of course, we all know how that tenure ended and what came after that. So it's hard for me to say if he's really lived up to the hype. But these next 2 guys didn't live up to the hype at all. #1 in 2016 was Josh Jackson, and #1 in 2017 was Marvin Bagley. Josh Jackson ended up being taken 4th overall, and Bagley was taken 2nd overall. And both have simply struggled to find their way in the NBA. But the career of Bagley will always be a little more tragic because he was taken 1 pick before maybe one of the greatest players ever, Luka Doncic. #1 in 2018 was RJ Barrett. Barrett had a similar story to Wiggins, a kid from Canada that dominated a prep school in the US in his senior year and earned a perfect 1.0 rating on 24/7 Sports. Barrett didn't have quite as much hype going into the draft though. He was taken 3rd overall by the Knicks. His career has been up and down, but I still see flashes of true stardom for him. Number 1 in 2019 was James Wiseman. He had everything a high school big man could have: athleticism, skill, size, but he had to sit out the majority of his freshman year of college at Memphis due to illegal practices in his recruiting. But that didn't stop the Warriors from taking him number 2 overall, and I can tell you, they are very much regretting that decision now. Wiseman is still young and very inexperienced, but man, if the Warriors took LaMelo Ball, that would have been scary. And finally, number 1 in 2020 was Cade Cunningham, another star from Montford who played on one of the most talented high school teams ever with guys like Scotty Barnes and Moses Moody. All signs are pointing towards superstardom for Cade Cunningham, but unfortunately he will be missing the rest of this season due to a surgery on his shin. Some guys went down a dark path and never played in the league, some became NBA role players, and some became NBA legends. Nothing is guaranteed, even if you were once considered the best in the world at what you do. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the Where Are They Now video we made about 7th Woods. He too was once considered the number 1 player in the country when he was young, and of course was famously known for having one of the best high school mixtapes ever. So go check out that video to see what happened to him. As always, thank you so much for the continued support, and we'll see you in the next one.